Today's episode is brought to you by applaudable.net.
And so what a performance mindset says is, I'm not quite there yet.
Do you want to explain what that means, rejecting the concept of the negative?
Well, I think what's important, and it follows on from what we've been talking about, it's that ability to reframe what's happening in front of us, that we either have successes or opportunities to learn is one way of conceptualizing exactly that kind of phrase, because what the alternative is to say that we have successes and we have failures. But maybe rather than thinking of something as being a failure, maybe it was an opportunity to learn. And we're much more likely to embrace that concept and move forward with it. And the other thing that it does is it changes our emotional experience with it as well. That, your example of what you did with that particular player is a great example that, in addition to changing, as you said, the narrative, which is incredibly important because we tell ourselves stories all the time, and just because we think it doesn't mean that it's true. So you really worked on them with that story. And I imagine, without knowing the full circumstances of that athlete, but I imagine what it also did is it changed the emotional tone of what was going on, that to say good shot is motivating. It makes you feel good, and we know that athletes often respond positively in terms of performance when they have emotions that are making them feel good about themselves, and it's helping them in terms of, the way they conceptualize what's going on.
Because ultimately, in the book, you refer to dopamine, and that when we achieve something, dopamine's released. It's a reward, and that's why many play sport. If you're changing a narrative and you're getting a dopamine hit every time, then it's probably a good experience, even if you are failing to an extent.
No, and it's actually part of the success. It's sometimes, I don't think that you reach the full heights of your capacity unless you have failed along the way, because that's how you're actually refining what it is that you know and what it is that you do. So, it's rather than thinking of failure, let's go with that term because we all kind of know what it is. So rather than seeing failure for what it is that's a disappointment, gee, let's kick that to the curb and pretend that didn't happen. Let's embrace it as an opportunity to get that much better. And so it's actually not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced when it happens, so we can build on it and then get better.
Do you want to speak to the two mindsets and also to your conceptualization of moving the narrative from being a growth mindset to more of a performance mindset?
Yeah, so with a fixed mindset, that's where we have, it's exactly as it's described, where we have a very set view about how things are. So if we were thinking about it in terms of academic studies, if we all cast our minds back to our school days, or maybe some of us are still there, and you think about your performance and usually I find I need to give the example of maths or English, and it will resonate for someone where they go, oh no, I wasn't very good at maths. So the notion that you're not good at something might be an example of a fixed mindset. And what that means is that the way you think influences how you feel, which influences what you then do. So if you go with a narrative of, I'm not very good at maths, let's stick with that one for the moment, then it's unlikely you're going to enroll in a degree in mathematics at university. It makes sense that you may not necessarily go down that path. And so what happens is when we have a fixed mindset, it tends to limit our potential. And it certainly does. And I know this even from my teaching days at uni. I teach in sports psychology, but I also used to teach in research design and statistics, which no one ever seems to want to talk to me about. But anyway, but it's interesting. It's interesting that when I used to teach statistics and I was teaching psychology students, so psychology students would come in, many without an expectation that we would even be touching a formula or an equation, and couldn't quite see the connection as to why we might. And so I would get students say, and this was back in the early days when computers were also a fairly new thing in the classroom, which kind of dates me a little bit, I guess. But they would say things like, oh no, computers don't like me. I don't, and I would try to, encourage these students to think about the fact that computers actually don't have emotions and they don't hate you at all. But what would happen is that you'd see those students hesitate. You'd see them pull back. You'd see them not, they didn't want to touch the keyboard because they didn't want to break it, that kind of notion. So when we have a fixed mindset, it really limits us. And it doesn't just limit us in terms of the things we think we're not good at. It also limits us in terms of the things that we know we're good at. So if I have a belief that I am a good athlete, and let's say I'm a track athlete, so I'm a good runner, So one of the things that happens if I have a fixed mindset around that as well, that I'm good and I'm capable and I always win, then that becomes limiting in itself, because what that does is it means performance actually becomes a very anxious place. And what you often see is there's been some good research with teenagers looking at those who are quite capable, and when you put them with a fixed mindset into a position where they have the opportunity to do something harder, where there's a higher risk of failing, they don't want to do it. So a fixed mindset can be unhelpful when you are both successful at something and when where we more typically see it about the things that we don't think that we're so capable of doing. Within a growth, or what I prefer to call a performance mindset, it's really about seeing that exactly what we're talking about before, that there are times that we won't achieve this success that we are striving for. And not only is that okay, but that's a necessary part of getting better. And so what a performance mindset says is, I'm not quite there yet. And I love that word yet. It's one that I often try to, I have teenage sons, so whenever they come at me with I'm not good at such and such, whatever it is, I try and encourage them to add that word yet to the end of the sentence, because it offers the potential for growth, the potential for improvement. And particularly when we're looking at people in the field of high performance, we know that not every day is a sunny day. So there's going to be times when it's not going to go so well, and that we need to take that by both hands and really embrace it and see that as the opportunity to get to some of those end goals that we might have for ourselves.
Thanks for joining us for a basketball conversation. Feel free to start a conversation of your own with other OzSwoosh superfans by commenting below. And I look forward to sharing our next conversation with you soon. I hope you'll join us again sometime. Catch you later.